It's incredible. Biden's claim that the nation hasn't upheld the ideals and the specific ideal that all men are created equal certainly ignores the progress over the entire life of this nation, but in particular of the past 60 years, which he has lived through. And the fact that Biden served as vice president for the only black American president in our history. But Biden seems to forget much. Biden's lurch to the left is precisely what President Trump warned about in his address at Mount Rushmore, about a radical left hell-bent on destroying America's history, our heritage, as well as the statues of our heroes.
In our schools, our newsrooms, even our corporate boardrooms, there is a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted, and punished. It's not going to happen to us. Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. In so doing, they would destroy the very civilization that rescued billions from poverty, disease, violence, and hunger, and that lifted humanity to new heights of achievement, discovery, and progress. To make this possible, they are determined to tear down every statue, symbol, and memory of our national heritage.
And turning to the east, Red Storm rising, the Chinese ambassador to the United Kingdom calling on the estimated 120,000 Chinese students within the United Kingdom to, quote, serve the motherland, end quote. The Chinese ambassador told students, I hope you will carry on the glorious tradition of patriotism. I hope you will always live your personal dreams in the greater cause of striving for the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation, end quote. Working for the motherland. This coming as the UK is set to phase out the Chinese telecom giant Huawei from the nation's 5G networks, which is a reversal of the UK's earlier decision this year in which they stated Huawei would play a limited role in those networks, but their concerns about surveillance and simple appropriation by China has changed the mind of the leadership of the UK just in time. And there we are. And the president, thankfully, has sent American naval force to the South China Sea to remind China of just who we are as a nation. The national left-wing media, again, missing the mark when reporting on the China virus. CNN today ran the headline. Are you ready? Quote, doctors say the U.S. is in a free fall with coronavirus as 32 states struggle with higher rates of infection, as if CNN was pulling for a certain outcome, as apparently so would be NBC. They reported, quote, big crowd celebrated July 4th as coronavirus cases spike across the country, end quote. The Washington Post updated its China virus coverage last night and ran this headline, and it is a beauty. Quote, 7-day average case total in the U.S. sets record for 27th straight day. What is missing from these stories? Well, quite a bit, actually, and the most salient consideration, the fact that even as cases are increasing, indeed they are, the deaths from the China virus have plunged dramatically. Yesterday, 212 people died in this country from the virus. That is the lowest number of deaths since 162 Americans died back on March 24th. Deaths so far are down so much that the virus will soon cease to qualify as an epidemic according to the guidelines of the CDC itself. Last week, the China virus deaths accounted for 5.9% of total American deaths, down from 9% just the previous week, and the 10th straight week of decline. The CDC states, quote, "The percentage is currently at the epidemic threshold, but will likely change as more death certificates are processed, particularly for recent weeks." I don't know how such outstanding news outlets as CNN, NBC, and the Washington Post could fail to notice that very salient and important point. But they did. There you have it. And on Wall Street today, stocks, well, they rallied. A strong beginning to the week and the quarter. The Dow up 460 points, the S&P up 50, the NASDAQ, well, a new record close for the NASDAQ, which gained 226 points today. The 24th record of the year. My goodness. Volume on the big board, 4.8 billion shares. Crude oil staying above $40 a barrel, $40.63. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. And my new book, The Trump Century, How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever, is available for pre-order now at thetrumpcentury.com. That's thetrumpcentury.com. I love that title, don't you? The book will be released on September 22nd. You can pre-order right now. Up next, another Supreme Court win for President Trump, sending never-Trumpers reeling. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton joins us next, and he will be able to gloat a bit, I think, on this, and also remind us of some deep concerns about when the Justice Department will deliver justice. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Breaking news now. The Supreme Court today announcing another win for President Trump and the nation, and dealing a blow to the never-Trumpers on the Electoral College issue. The court unanimously holding that it is constitutional for states to require electors to back the winner of the state's presidential election and to punish any who violate that requirement. How about that? The Supreme Court making more and more sense, it seems, by the day. Quite a departure from the trajectory of the past several decades. Also breaking tonight, Hunter Biden back in the news, and it turns out he's no longer on the board of that Chinese private equity firm, BHR Partners, not on the board, but it turns out that one of Hunter's companies still owns 10% of that firm. 10%. This, as Hunter's father, Joe, pledged in December that no one in his family would be involved in any foreign business if he's elected president. Well, he's that 10% investment may be just left where it is. Joining us tonight to take all of this up is Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, I want to get first your reaction to the decision on the Supreme Court holding that the Electoral College really does matter.
Well, it's an attack on our republic, this attack on the Electoral College. The left was trying to game the system by trying to manipulate individual electors to overturn the results of the election. But the threat isn't over, Lou, because they're also trying to upend the Electoral College by requiring states, let's say Texas votes for a Republican president, but the popular vote nationally goes for the opponent. Well, under this scheme, Texas would be required potentially to throw all of its electors in the pot with the person who won the popular vote as opposed to the one who won the vote in Texas or somewhere else. So essentially it would undo the compromise at the heart of our constitutional system, which allowed big states and small states to get together and come up with a compromise that protects the power of the small states by having electors to overcome the populist big states that could swamp the system in any federal election. Look, we have individual states, Lou. The left hates it, and that's why they're trying to undo the Electoral College.
Well, and they have some company because there are a number of people on the right who would like to see the federal system prevail over the federalist system of this country. and to eliminate states' rights as well. This is, as you say, and as Judicial Watch has been pursuing, this is a critically important issue among so many. The Republican Party, do you believe it is sufficiently animated in defending against the assault by the Democrats and the left in this country?
Generally, no. I mean, one of the problems, besides the kind of the weak approach too many Republicans have to these dire threats to our nation, is that the left is focusing and fighting on so many issues. And the standard operating procedure for many Republicans, and frankly just many regular people, is, you know, we just can't fight everywhere. But they're fighting everywhere. They're fighting on the Electoral College. They're trying to swamp the mails with ballots. They had the coup impeachment against Trump. They've got violence in the streets. Lou, our republic is under attack like it's never been before, and it can't be the status quo or the typical approach that defenders of the Constitution typically take, thinking that, well, they'll just lose in the long run and we'll just win in the long run. That's not going to work.
I want to take up the Biden issue, and I'm talking about the Hunter Biden issue, still with 10% ownership in that private equity, Chinese private equity firm. But I want to get, if you will, a sense from you as to the president taking on, for the first time, corporate America and its role in this this left-wing fascism that is being bred in this country. I have to give the president great credit, because that took great courage.
Well, that was one of the most important speeches, not only of his presidency, but of any recent American presidency, in terms of highlighting the left's assault on our freedoms. And one of the dirty little secrets, the left would have you believe that corporate America is on the side of the right or conservatives. That's far from the truth. On cultural constitutional issues, the leftists control the corporations. They're pressuring social media to censor Trump, censor conservatives. They are subsidizing, literally, the left that's trying to overthrow the country now through a communist revolution. It's a troubling time period, and we got to highlight that corporations are no friend of our values on these key issues.
Yeah, did you see any or hear about the commercials that were running over the weekend from the BLM? Apparently, I don't know who's paying for them, but supporting BLM, saying that the time for radical change is right now. We've got to have change, but again, not saying what that change is. It's a 30-second commercial, but the time for change is now. I mean, watching television over the weekend just a bit, I mean, everybody is preaching something. It is amazing that the number of organizations, corporations, hectoring America to change. It's stunning to me, and no one seems to know what the hell they're talking about. Maybe they don't either.
Well, the corporate left, or the corporations, are afraid of the left through boycotts and just being embarrassed generally. And they've got this attitude when it comes to advertising and marketing to double down in terms of supporting these radical left-wing movements. You have the NFL coming down on the side of anti-Americanism. You've got the NBA supporting it as well. It's a terrible situation, and it's up to Americans to say no to it. You just can't let it slide by, because we'll lose our country before we know it.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I want to take up Hunter Biden, but we're up against a hard out. So, Tom, I'm going to do something I hate to do, impose on you to stay with us through this commercial break to take up Hunter Biden and all that Judicial Watch has done in pursuing the truth of his situation. We'd like to hear your thoughts on all of this. Share your comments. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. And Just the News editor John Solomon and the Hudson Institute's Michael Pillsbury among our guests here tomorrow. Please be with us for that. Stay with us for more with Tom Fitton. Oh, yes, and the Bidens. We'll be right back. We're back with Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton. Tom, we find out that Hunter Biden still owns 10% of that Chinese private equity firm. Your thoughts?
Well, Joe Biden has a China problem. His son got a sweetheart deal from the Chinese communists. We still don't have all the details about it. You can bet the Chinese do, and it will be held over Joe Biden through the campaign and beyond. We need the full details, and just knowing now that he still has investments, or his son still has investments tied to the communist Chinese, just really is the icing on the cake. And you know, he's hiding records. Yeah. The State Department's hiding records. We just sued the University of Delaware for his Senate records. Joe Biden has a public record that, frankly, still isn't public, which is a big problem.
Absolutely. Well, Tom Fenton, thanks so much. We appreciate it, again, for all you and Judicial Watch do. Thanks so much. We turn now to Ed Rollins, the savant himself, top strategist for Great America PAC, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst, and that's all of your mini honorifics that I'm going to read. Ed, how are you? Good to have you with us. Give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts about the left, because the president took on the left in glorious fashion. Your thoughts?
Well, the line is drawn in the sand of what kind of campaign he wants to run. Obviously, he has to be comfortable with the campaign he wants to run. Democrats are very enthused. They're leading on all the public polls, closer in private polls, but they're still out there. They think they have a real shot at this thing. They're going to throw every single thing at it they can, and Republicans have to do the same. Republicans and independents. The plurality of Americans today are independent. At the end of the day, they're going to want strong leadership, and the president has to attack both the virus and the economic crisis. If he can convince Americans he can do both of those and get us moving forward again, he'll win. If not, this could be a wipeout.
Yeah, it could be, I guess. Anything's possible, as they say, but I still think the American people are not fools. They want a president who is strong. They want a president who has intelligence and a demonstrated record. Joe Biden has none of that. And it's interesting that the former White House doctor suggested that Joe Biden has a cognitive problem, which every survey shows at least a third of Americans think he's right, that Joe Biden has a real mental issue.
He obviously had the chance to examine him. He's now a congressional candidate endorsed by the president in Texas 13. We'll know whether he's a nominee in a few days. Good guy, an admiral, retired admiral. Bottom line here, I think, though, is that Joe Biden is just a name on the ballot. This was an anti-Trump campaign by the left. They'll do everything they can to get him out of there, and he's got to fight back. Joe Biden, unless he stumbles on the stage in a debate, which is certainly a possibility, is just going to be hidden as much as possible. And he won't talk about the new programs that he wants to put in, but just assume everything that's left and bad will be what the Democrats want.
There isn't a weekend that goes by that something Joe Biden says isn't just, I mean, it looks like some sort of something run through a mixer verbally, making no sense. He seems often to be incoherent.
I think obviously he may very well be, but the bottom line, Lou, as you know better than anybody else, other than you and a few others on Fox, no one's telling that story well. The story of anything the president says or does gets highlighted and amplified and lied about. So the reality here is, don't underestimate this race. It's going to be a tough, close race.
Well, let me ask you about this, the Lincoln Project, so-called, which is a fancy name. They've sent $3 million of money to a communications firm owned by the PAC's treasurer. They're also doing business. It looks like that they've got a lot of inside business going on. It looks like they're doing very well with their project, but it doesn't seem to add up here. What do you think?
Well, it's a small group of consultants who worked for Romney and worked for McCain. They're ex-Republicans. They shouldn't be able to claim a Republican. They're not Republicans. They haven't been good Republicans ever. But they're very effective inside the Beltway. They're not effective across the country. And the kind of buys that they're making aren't big enough to have any impact. But it's an agitation. The president every day gets up and sees these ads, and they're good operatives, but they're not going to be a factor.
Yeah. Ed Rollins, always a factor. Good to see you, my friend. Thanks so much. Ed Rollins. Up next, a sheriff from Florida. Breaking news now. The folks at the Washington Post running an op-ed. It's titled, quote, "Both namesakes of Washington and Lee University perpetrated racial terror. The school should be renamed." Again, this from the Washington Post. Meanwhile, a town near Youngstown, Ohio, is now a sanctuary city for historical statues. Newton Falls, Ohio. Its mayor says they'll put any statues that cities want to remove in a place of honor in their town. Well, our next guest is the sheriff who posted this Facebook video about the lawless left.
God is absent from the media's message, or Black Lives Matter, or any other group out there that's making themselves a spectacle, disrupting what we know to be our quality of life in this country.
Well, joining us tonight is the man who had the guts to stand up and say those words, Sheriff Darrell Daniels from Clay County in Florida. Sheriff, it's an honor to talk with you and to talk with the sheriff who is concerned about God and the quality of life and this way of life in this country. Why did you feel compelled to make the statement that you did?
Well, thanks for having me, Lou. A lot of people are doing a lot of talking across this country, but that's just it. They're doing a bunch of talking, and I'm talking about the leadership across the country. In my world, leaders are supposed to lead, and talking is cheap. And we can march all day long, we can take knees all day long, but for me as a leader, that doesn't bring any resolution or any closure to any kind of problem as far as I'm concerned. And for the folks in my constituency, they look to me for answers and for peace and for some closure when it comes to problems being identified and bringing some solutions and recommendations for solutions, not only for Clay County, but across this country. And when I look at the leadership or lack thereof, I see and hear a bunch of talking, a bunch of outward manifestations of frustrated people, but what I don't see is anybody doing anything actionable. And I was letting it be known, we were faced here in Clay County with an individual who thought this was going to be the county where he could bring outside folks. He actually reached out to organizations like BLM and Dream Defenders and thought that this would be the location to have such an event. Well, you know, I draw a hard line when it comes to a place where I lay my head. This is my home. The folks of Clay County are my friends and my constituents. These are the folks that I love and care for, and I will be jumped if I don't do all I can as the sheriff to protect these people.
Yeah, I would have to think that Black Lives Matter would think long and hard before taking on leaders like you and others in Clark County who will not just simply buy into a Marxist mission statement and a bunch of posturing, rather than looking, as you say, at what are the actions and what are the results and what is the mission. I just want to share with our audience, I'm not going to read all of this, but if we could put up that mission statement from Black Lives Matter, because there are corporations and heads of corporations in this country written $10 million checks to this organization, and I don't believe they know who they're sending money to. And I'd like to read that if you could put up the, there it is. We are a collective of liberators who believe in an inclusive and spacious movement. We also believe in order to win and bring as many people with us along the way, we must move beyond the narrow nationalism that is all too prevalent in black communities. We must ensure we're building a movement that brings us all to the front. We are working for a world where black lives are no longer systematically targeted for demise. The call for black lives to matter is a rallying cry for all black lives striving for liberation. We've just had one of the most violent weekends in years in this country, and some of those deaths are attributable directly to Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations where people died. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, we have a lot going on in this country, and again, I'll say folks are frustrated by what they perceive to be individual problems. I'm not naive, or my head is not buried in the sand to know that when I look in the mirror, I see a black life staring at me. But what's profoundly different about the folks who follow or ascribe to the ideologies of BLM is the fact that black lives have been mattering for a long time. And we can't pick and choose when we want to jump on the bandwagon of BLM when, just like you said, we had one of the most deadliest weekends in a long, long time in some of our large metropolitan cities. Where's BLM then? Why isn't there any outcry when things like this happen? Why is it only isolated to an incident where a non-minority officer engages a minority with deadly force. That doesn't happen that frequently. And when it does happen, it's like all hell breaks loose, as if it's the only thing that exists in this world. There are other things going on in society besides that, and all lives matter. And if all lives don't matter, then I should be out of this line of business, because I took an oath